Good morning, everybody. I just apologise, there's going to be a slight delay to the start of the meeting while we're waiting on one of the groups coming back. They're having a quick discussion, but I can only apologise, but hopefully we'll be able to start soon. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's meeting of the Executive, which also has our education function this morning. Firstly, I'd like to welcome our pupil reps, Rory Edwards and Roisin Kirk, to their first formal meeting. So I hope you're able to enjoy it and look forward to working with you over this coming session. Can I ask if we've got any apologies?
Convener, no apologies have been submitted.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Sinclair.
Thanks, Convener. It's not a declaration of interest, but I thought given that there is a report on today's agenda around community learning development, I would make a transparency statement that I have a close family member who works in the service.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sinclair. There are no other declarations. We'll move on to the minute held on the 10th of October. Firstly, can we accept that as a true and accurate record of the meeting?
Great.
Okay. Are there any matters that anybody would wish to ask for an update on at this time? No. Okay, thank you for that. We now have the rolling action log, and I'll go to Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Convener. And as usual, the rolling action log provides a record of decisions of the Executive where it is called for further reports and gives progress on the preparation and presentation of those reports. Where the report is not available by its expected reporting date, there will be an explanation provided for that in the comments column. The rolling action log is up to date as far as I can see, but it is available for members to ask questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moody. Are there any questions in relation to the rolling action log? Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. Just a quick question in relation to item 627 on page 13. Can we maybe get an indication as to the cost so far to the council in relation to pursuing this? I realise obviously it's probably officers' time, but if we can maybe just try and quantify it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Reid?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It is officers' time. You know that the council is required to submit a Gaelic plan, part of which includes Gaelic medium education. So, but with reference to this, it is about conducting the surveys and liaising with parents, analysing that, and then doing some further work with parents to find out exactly what the position is in terms of trying to find out how many parents would want to start P1 GME at the start of the coming session. I think our work behind this is driven by the costs that we're incurring at the moment. We currently transport 21 pupils to North Lanarkshire and Stirling councils, where they receive their GME at a cost of £3,700 per pupil. So when we're doing this work at the moment, we're doing it in line with how can we, would it be possible to deliver GME in Falkirk, which would result in some efficiencies for the council, and is there a demand for it? And in terms of why are we doing this? Well, the Education Scotland Act in 2016 establishes a process for parents to request GME, and then there is statutory guidance under Section 9 of the Gaelic Language Scotland Act 2005. So that's why we're carrying out this work, to see if there's a demand for it and if there's a way that we could deliver it more cost efficiently within Falkirk.
Thanks for that, John. I'm just wondering how this is going to be taken forward in the future. I mean, obviously there's a cost involved, and you've highlighted that. Do we get extra funding from the Scottish Government to cover this?
There is a Gaelic specific grant that comes into the authority, but it does not cover the full cost of the transport, which is why we're looking at alternative scenarios. There will be additional funding in terms of revenue funding for GME teachers in the initial stages of setting up any GME provision, and there is also the opportunity to apply for capital funding should we need to make any alterations to adapt any of our properties to accommodate GME provision. That will all be referenced in the report that we're hoping to bring back to the executive in January.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the rolling action log? No, thank you. We move into our agenda proper. First item is the Community Learning and Development Plan, and as in line with our standing orders, I'll open up for questions, but just to remind people, there's no amendments being tabled on this item, therefore there will be no debate, but I'll open up for questions first. No.
A quick question, Convener. With the plan going to be 24 to 25, sorry, 24 to 27. Well, is there any change from the plan for 21 to 24? It's a simple question.
Okay, I'll go to Mr. McGuinness.
If you don't mind, could I defer to Sarah McCulley on the call, please? Thank you.
Morning, Sarah.
Good morning, Convener. Yes, certainly there has been some changes made to the plan that was previously presented for the period 21 to 24. However, there has been significant elements that have built on previous actions, actions that have been developed but not seen through to the end, or actions where we have been unable to make the progress that we would like to. The main change is the way that we have presented the actions in line with community learning and development delivery theme areas. Previously, the plan was very, very broad and attempted to align with every element of the Falkirk plan. However, given that we have less resources at the moment, and obviously ongoing kind of budget restraints and considerations around budgets, we've had to make sure that the data and the feedback from stakeholders and participants have been regarded with regards to a more focused and targeted approach. So it seemed only fitting that we then aligned provision to that feedback and that consultation work, the data analysis and the delivery theme areas within community learning and development. So that's the main area that has seen change, the targeted approach, the alignment to the delivery theme areas. However, there has been a significant build on the previous action plan as well.
Thank you very much. The work that happens with the community learning team was very apparent through COVID. And I'm happy to support the report and recognising the English speaking other languages is very key if we want to engage in our community. It's very diverse, which we're open to in Falkirk. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bailey Kerr. Councillor Spears.
Thank you. If I could draw your attention to page 23 and 24, 5.1 and 7.1. The CLD plan is aligned with the Falkirk plan to tackle pressing issues on deprivation and inequality. But on 7.1, there are currently no financial implications. Can you further explain how we have, especially in Grangemouth areas of child poverty and deprivation, but there's no financial implications?
Okay, thank you. Sarah?
Yes, so the financial implications are with regards to the resourcing of the plan itself and the resource requirements to deliver on the plan. So there aren't financial implications at this moment in time identified with regards to delivery of the plan, because we have obviously budgeted out what is required, not just within council services, but across the wider community learning and development partnership, which stems a number of services in our local community. With regards to the alignment to the Falkirk plan, we have, as I've suggested, aligned actions to the community learning and development theme areas, which include adult learning, youth work, holistic family support, and also community development. And obviously all of these areas potentially feed into the aspiration with regards to eradication of child poverty. But the plan itself does show within the table where those actions specifically align to the Falkirk plan and the actions and ambitions within the Falkirk plan as well.
So can I further ask then, is this service being cut regarding the financial implication that you spoke to the previous question on?
So all services, as you're aware, Councillor Spears, are under review with regards to any core budget. So there is currently in process a merger between community learning and development and the employment and training unit coming together. And that is to provide greater opportunity to bolster the resources and the potential of access and sharing of external funding streams where there's a commonality between the two services that means that we can utilise those resources more effectively within our communities, reducing duplication, however also making sure that we can bolster and support what we've suggested we would like to do within this plan and the wider kind of Falkirk plan.
So there will be a financial implication?
There's not a financial implication with regards to the delivery of this plan due to the accessibility of external funding streams. There will be a financial implication with regards to the merge of the two services coming together as we look to where there can be efficiencies identified across a number of different areas between both of these services.
I've left where I was when I came in with the question. We especially in Grangemouth, where we have high levels of deprivation and child poverty, extreme concern that there will be financial implications and not delivering this plan. I mean, carrying this plan out and to the benefit of the young people in the town that I represent.
Can I just remind people this is question time, not statements. Are there any further questions? Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, convener. As Bailey Kerr said earlier on, there was a lot of work that went on during COVID, but one of the other things that happened during COVID was the reduction in some of the youth clubs and youth activities for obvious reasons. And my perception at the moment, and I say it's only a perception, and that from anecdotal evidence, is that much of the activity that there used to be has not started up again. I wonder if officers could say a little more about what they're going to be doing to promote more youth activities, just to reassure us that that's getting a priority in this plan.
Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Hannah. I'll bring in Sarah in a second. I just want to highlight we've identified this very fact, particularly in line with the SPR. You see under the risk section at 7.5, we've been working very closely with a number of our community groups, particularly third sector, to ensure there's much better collaboration and utilisation of the facilities that are available to ensure we can access and support the youth within our communities. But maybe hand over to get some additional information from Sarah.
Certainly, thank you, Michael. Councillor Hannah, yes, there's actually a review underway. I'm working very closely with the team leader within Community Learning and Development at the moment to look at the current provision that's being delivered. As you've suggested, there has been a kind of reduction across this area for a range of different reasons, and we rely very heavily on our volunteers with regards to delivery of some of this provision within our communities as well. However, there's a variety of options that we have been discussing with regards to the alignment with council services or the alignment with more national services to support the delivery of youth services in our communities moving forward. So we are at the moment within a review period, but we are hoping that by the time we've undertaken our development sessions with the management team and the staff in December and February, that we'll have a clearer plan and a picture with regards to options of bolstering our youth community kind of services in 2025, 2026.
Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions, I'll go to Councillor Sinclair to move the report.
Thank you, convener. I don't intend to say too much on this. I think the report that's contained in the agenda today is quite comprehensive in the information that it provides. I think what I would say about it, that it's right at this point in time, given the challenges that we're all facing across local government and public sector in general, to target resources and support to what will provide better outcomes for people in our communities. And I'm pleased to see that this report's been brought forward. Clearly, this is a statutory requirement for the council, and it's for us here to agree the Community Learning Development Plan, given the focus on identifying priority groups in consultation with wider stakeholders, as well as identifying the need. It is an ambitious plan and it builds on what's been done in the past, but obviously it's right, as I said previously, to target that support where it will garner better outcomes and ultimately lead to more resilience within our communities. Of course, there are challenges to be faced, given that resources are narrow at the moment and limited in terms of both sort of voluntary resources that we can call upon. Obviously, it's noted in the report that ESOL, or English for speakers of other languages, is very limited at the moment, and access to venues. But yep, obviously this is part of our statutory requirement to submit this and agree it today, and I am happy to move the report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Garner.
Thank you, convener. I'm happy to second. I would like to pass on my thanks to Sarah and the teams at CLD and ETU.
Thank you. I would ask if any of the other group leaders would wish to comment.
No, we have no amendment to this.
Okay.
No comment.
Okay, thank you. In which case, are we content to agree the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we move on to item 6, which is the Inclusion and Wellbeing Service proposed relocation. And again, I will open it up to questions. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, convener. I just wondered, it's clearly no, we are not in any way challenging these proposals, but I would like if officers could say a little more about the relocation of some of the community services and the actions that are being taken to ensure that the community services are able to use the Dawson Centre.
Okay, Mr. Kettrick.
Convener, thank you. There are currently 14 regular users of the Dawson Centre. 7 of these groups do have bookings between 9 AM and 3:30 PM, but 4 of those user groups are actually council service delivery, and they'll be relocated within other local council buildings or in nearby community facilities. There is 11 regular groups who meet in the Excellence in Childcare Centre, which is part of the campus. 5 of those groups have bookings between 9 AM and 3 PM. 2 of those again are council services, and we've engaged with council services for their relocation. The intention is we will be engaging with all groups to identify alternative premises for them where they need them. For those daytime ones, the evening, weekends and school holiday lettings are unaffected, other than during the period of construction, when we'll be engaging with colleagues at the nearby Langley's Primary for access in there. That's immediately next door. We're also aware of that there has been discussions with Bainsford Community Centre, which is just along the road, on some of the groups potentially using there, and that building is currently subject to a valid community asset transfer application, so it provides additional opportunities for them. As part of this engagement process, there is both a community and a statutory education engagement process, and similar to what we've done with the SPR across the board where buildings have been closing, we'll work with groups to find alternative premises for them. I would hasten to add this building is down to close in April. Anyway, under the current SPR proposals, there is no current community asset transfer application in. We do have an expression of interest from a group, but it's never matured or materialised any further than their initial interest back earlier in the year.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I may, just one other question I have for officers. It's clearly because of the needs of the particular service group here we're talking about, it's important that there's a very detailed transition plan as people move from one building to another. I wonder if officers could say a little more about how that is to be managed.
Just for clarity, I'm assuming you're referring to the inclusion and wellbeing service in that transition.
Yes, I apologise.
So, I've not quite a bit of experience of in relocating schools. The approach will be as we will be engaging with the staff, the pupils and the parents. We'll also be engaging with travel providers or transport providers to look at those arrangements. We have what will be known as a smooth transition where pupils will be taken down as the building is being commissioned but still retaining their main facility where they would be, to get them orientated, to get them acclimatised to the building, and you do that over a period of a number of months, and then you move to the full transition. Similarly, we do the same with staff, parents. You show them all round. Going back to the community groups, we will also sit down with community groups and ensure that we manage the transition as best as possible for them to new premises, and that could mean support through removals and stuff like that. And it's similar to what we've done on other SPR properties.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Reid wants to add to
that. Yeah, on top of the education, I was actually down in the Inclusion and Wellbeing Centre on Tuesday meeting with the senior team there and discussing the plans for what can be delivered and how the provision might have to change as we transition from the Lauriston campus down to the Dawson Centre. So we're just in the process of forming a short life working group with mainstream primary, secondaries and the staff and partners at the Inclusion and Wellbeing Service to make sure that we are maximising the potential of the investment that's being made and the outcomes for the young people.
Thank you for those reassurances. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Spears.
Thank you. I welcome this inclusion for our wellbeing service Can you tell me, is there any plans for any other services to move to halls that are presently up for asset transfer that would help them stay open and help the user groups within these communities to have a community centre?
The short answer, convener, is unfortunately not. However, always willing to engage with any service who feel that they could utilise properties that are identified within the strategic property review, not just community properties, but other ones. But at this stage, this is the only one that we're aware of.
I was also addressing it, hopefully it will get picked up by the education department. Do you have any use for our halls that are lying vacant, empty and boarded up at the moment?
Well, at the moment, Councillor Spears, what we're just undertaking is a review of the learning estate across all of our establishments in relation to condition and how fit for purpose they are. So we would factor that in, I would imagine, as we go through that review at that time.
I've already been to a meeting with you in Blackness, as you're aware. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are... Oh, sorry, Bailey Kerr.
Thanks, convener. With regards to the Dawson Centre campus, does this include the sub?
Convener, yeah, it includes the sub, which is in the report it's referred to as the Excellence in Childcare Facility.
Okay. Probably a similar question to Councillor Hannah asked about the Dawson Centre. The sub, as everybody calls it, is a very well used part of the Dawson Centre. As the community groups that use that, are they being helped relocate or be able to use these as premises?
And, you know, the short answer is yes. I mean, well, we've referred to the Dawson Centre. It should really be referring to it as the Dawson Centre campus. That includes the Excellence in Childcare Facility and all groups that are listed and that I've mentioned earlier. We'll be engaging with all of those, both individually and through our wider consultation.
Okay, probably my last question is for the Lorison campus, £2.4 million to get it up to a maintenance backlog. That's not happened in a year. Why we've not invested over the years for to try and get it into a reasonable. Probably that happened before you even came, Paul. But it just seems to be a trend that over the years that the buildings that we've got, we've no had maintenance on them and kept them up to scratch.
Convener, like many local authorities, as I've kind of repeatedly said, the investment in property assets is a challenge because it's very, very expensive and it takes a long time to see improvements come through at a strategic level. In terms of that individual asset at the time, it was acquired, it was fit for purpose, it suited what the service needed. Unfortunately, the nature of the building is that it's not very adaptable, and even if we were to spend that money, it's still in a pretty poor location. So at the right time, historically, it was probably the right decision to make. I can't comment, it wasn't here, but certainly going forward, we'd be looking at the Dawson campus as an improvement on what's currently there without spending £2.4 million.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Gibson.
I'll maybe just add to that. At the time of the move, we needed to come out of a very old and inappropriate facility at Weedings Hall, and that building became available. And as has been said, it was fit for purpose at the time. It was never intended to be a long-term proposition, but again, it's the competing priorities of the service that hadn't been able to move that on as quickly as would have been anticipated. But I think the opportunity now has presented itself to do that and at the right time. I was just going to ask both Mr Kentrick and Mr Reid around why particularly that particular site for the Inclusion and Wellbeing Service.
Convener, I can answer that one. When we were doing the SPR analysis of the sizes of the buildings and the service needs before we declare them surplus, we always look to identify, as was mentioned by Councillor Spears, is there service needs and demands. And having visited the Inclusion and Wellbeing Service, we checked, was that compatible with the size of the Dawson Centre campus? And the short answer is it's a fairly good match, but there's also the advantages of the playing field, the mugger, the small garden area, the car park. It's very much a secure setting for pupils. It's also next to Langley's Primary, which is a production kitchen, so we can have the benefits of the meals being delivered from there. And being next to Langley's Primary, we also have the benefits of a joint facilities management cohort of staff to manage it. So it ticked all the boxes in terms of the service need.
Okay, thank you. Mr Reid, do you want to add anything?
I would just add that, I mean, I don't know if you've all had the opportunity to visit the Inclusion and Wellbeing Service, but as you're driving up to it, the first impressions of it would not be positive and would not be fitting with our aspirations for the young people who attend there. So the new facility, I think, will provide a much greater range of educational opportunities, but our vision for the service is to integrate it much more with our mainstream schools in terms of primary and secondary. So that's why we've established that group to look at what we actually deliver across that service with our mainstream schools and with our partners.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, if there are no further questions, I'll go to Councillor Sinclair to move the report.
Thanks, Convener. Again, I don't intend to spend too much time on this other than to say, firstly, the Inclusion and Wellbeing Service provides a really vital support within our wider education service for children and young people aged 3 to 18 who have additional support needs, be that social, emotional or behavioural barriers to learning, but it focuses on small group education as well as family support and community-based learning. But crucially, it's also a centre of excellence for staff skilled in trauma-informed practices, which, as we all know, is more important today than it ever has been. We've heard a lot about the campus itself, the Dawson campus. Not only does it sit within my ward and the convener's ward and Councillor Bundy's ward, it sits 5 minutes walk from where I live, and I know how well thought of the centre is within the community, and obviously it's up to the service to ensure that the transition for community groups currently using the centre is as smooth as possible. But this, for me, this move and for the administration, I think it presents a real opportunity to get this service into a building that's modern and fit for purpose and delivers on outcomes for children, which is what we should all be focused on where this is concerned. The clear savings there are to the maintenance and so on and so forth is just an added element that will benefit the council wider. But this is about the support and the service delivery that's available to children and young people in our communities right now, and this presents a real opportunity for us. So I'm happy to, on that note, to move the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. I'm happy to second.
Okay, thank you. Any comment in relation from any of our group leaders?
No further comment.
Okay.
No comment.
No comment. Okay, we're happy to agree the report. Okay, moving on to the report in relation to the Soil Association Scotland, Food for Life here, and it's now I will open it up for questions. No, no questions.
Me.
Also, apologies.
So Champs are really, really supportive of this, of Falkirk going for this award. But we do have a couple of questions and it may not be something you know yet, and it might be able to be taken based on what other local authorities have done here in 5.4 that are already well on their way for the award. But is moving up to the next level of award dependent on most or all schools in the region having a better quality food supply or seeing more pupils eating the food? And if dependent on all, fantastic. But if dependent on most, how many? And please don't leave behind the schools who are not up to scratch with it.
Okay, Kenny. Welcome, Kenny, this morning.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you, convener. Thank you for your question. The first element of the question I would answer is that it is all schools that will progress, all primary schools will progress as a unit, and it will be an equal share, an equal application of the process across all schools. So all children will benefit, all young people will benefit to the same extent, particularly children who come from low income families who are entitled to free school meals, who we would be looking to enhance the opportunity to them to access the school meals provision. What's your second element, sorry?
Second question was, will the schools or local authority be reviewed yearly for this award, or how often will they be reviewed to know they're keeping up to standard?
Okay, thank you. Very good question. It's not as often as yearly, but what I have in mind, it's every 3 years, but I will be checking it. But what I would like to express is that we, as we're implementing this award, moving towards it like we should be, will be monitoring the satisfaction levels of the young people and the users of the service on a regular basis, not just annual, not just as a tick box once a year, but through this process we'll be much better informed as to what the feedback from the users will be, and the proof will be in the pudding, as they say. So thank you.
Very much so in this case.
Thank you.
Sorry, Scottish organic pudding.
Okay, Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, convener. I wonder if Kenny could maybe say just a little bit more about what is currently going on, because I think, you know, how close are we to being able to get this sort of award? What is currently going on? Because I know there is some good work going on in schools.
Thank you. First, I should say the school's catering service is already an excellent service. It plays an invaluable role in supporting the learning and teaching environment across Falkirk. I think personally we could do more to promote the role of the catering service and the value it brings for the amount of money that we spend in it within the council. In terms of where we are now, we have met with the Soil Association on the 28th of October, and we had a very positive conversation with them about our starting point, our base, which is what menus, what ingredients do we have at the moment. And I'm really pleased to say we're not far off meeting the standards that are required for the Bronze Award. It is with that level of confidence that we're looking to have this available and implemented by the start of next session. So that's a target for us all to meet, and for our teams to work together to achieve and give them some additional pride in what they do at the counter. The gap is not as big as we think. Our current procurement is very much all in line with local procurement, buying from Red Tractor Meat, for example, Scottish producers. That's all down to the good work that's done by my own catering team, but also colleagues in procurement and the council who guide us and provide advice. The next stage for us is to get the training done with the staff and bring the staff on board, the senior cooks and the catering assistants across the schools, and make sure that they understand and contribute and are listened to as we take this forward. Ultimately, this won't be delivered by me or John, the Director of Education. It'll be delivered by the people who cook the meals and serve them to the children. And again, I would say that in this particular service, there'll be an easy measure of whether this is successful or not. One will be that we don't increase cost, and two, that there's a level of customer satisfaction there and the meal uptake increases. So we are actually looking to increase our meal uptake in primary by over 350 meals a day. And my calculations would suggest if we can reach that target, we'll be reaching more children from low income households, and they will get the benefit of being well fed and ready for learning.
Thank you very much. Thank you, convener.
Thank you. Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, convener. Recommendation 2 says that application for the Bronze Award proceeds subject to this being achievable within existing budgets. But then 5.1 of the report says the Food for Life Scotland scheme is funded by the Scottish Government. There are no costs to local authorities in Scotland interested in gaining the award for the school meal service. So what is the additional cost that might take this beyond the existing budget?
Right, thank you, Councillor Bundy. I think the difference here is between the cost of the programme and the cost of the award being funded by the Scottish Government. The existing budget and reference in the recommendation is in terms of if we have to change suppliers or if we have to change the type of food. That's the reference to that in the second recommendation. So they're two separate things. So there's no cost for the award, but we anticipate that the suppliers we already use, local sustainable suppliers into our catering service, we think that will meet the requirements, but it's just flagging that up at this stage in case we had to change anything that did increase the cost.
Thank you for that answer. We all know about the impact of inflation, so say that we did go to a supplier who meets the conditions for the award, and then the cost of food goes up and it goes out with existing budgets. Is there any mechanism there to ensure that the council's not out of pocket?
Well, firstly, thank you for, it was yourself, Councillor Bundy, who actually initiated this, according to my information, so thank you for that, it's appreciated. The way we'll monitor the costs are, there are two sides to every story. There's the cost of increased ingredients, and in order to accommodate those costs within existing budgets, we need to sell more, we need to generate more income. So that's one element of it. The second element is about reducing waste. So we're bringing in more technology to target the types of meals that young people want. So, you know, a very crude analysis would be, let's not make 20 of a meal and have it sitting there ready for somebody to decide they want that on the day. We pre-order our meals, and they do that through the systems, the IP impact system that we already have. And in secondary, they've got a slightly different system. So we're looking to reduce waste. So that increased efficiency, in any other life, you would be looking at reduced costs. What we're looking to do in this council is both reduce costs wherever we can, but also not exceed our current budgets. And we can do that through close scrutiny of the income and reducing waste and improving the meal offer to children so that they want to increase the number of meals being sold on a daily basis. So it's quite complicated, but we're all up for the challenge, and I would hope to report back in due course that we've done that.
Thank you. Councillor Spears.
I have 5 points, which will lead to 5 questions. First point in question, you think this will engender greater use by our client group, the school children?
I'm happy
to go through the 5 first.
That might be helpful, just in case any of them are related. Thank you.
You mentioned customer satisfaction. Do you think this will stop the large amount of kids that leave at lunchtime and go to shopping centres and fish and chip shops? And I'm not saying they personally cause problems for me, but I've got to take cognizance of social media like everybody else. And do you think it will help alleviate the litter problem? I believe some schools, there's a flock of seagulls follow kids along the street to pick up the waste. This has been incorporated, I believe, in the council plan's priorities, supporting stronger and healthier communities. Can you fully explain that if so many children choose not to use this service?
Okay, did you manage to get those?
Okay, is that your 5 points? Yeah, okay, thank you. Right. Yes, I thought it was 3, but anyway, if that's all 5, I'll try and answer them. That's good. Thank you, Councillor Spears. Do you think it's going to be greater use? Listen, there's a high uptake of school meals from those that are eligible for free school meals. It's 76% of children eligible in primary take up the FSM offer. 65% in secondary take up the offer, and 65% in our ASN provisions take up the offer. So there's no doubt that young people who stay in school to have their lunch, many of whom come with packed lunches, but those who do use the catering service, there's no doubt that what we need to do is take account of their feedback. What is it they are wanting to see? And we're setting up a group, a commission, if you like, of young people with the catering service to try and get the menus right within the guidelines, the nutritional guidelines that are provided to us. But this is about a quality mark. And we've got an opportunity here, once we achieve this, to market and promote the catering service further. So we would hope, as Kenny alluded to as well, that we're hoping within primaries to be serving an extra 350 meals extra per day. In terms of children leaving school at lunchtime, I think many secondary people see that as a passage of right, that they like to do that. They like to go up the street, as they call it. There is a power in the pound that they sell, and there are many small local retailers that benefit from the money they spend that goes into the local economy. Now, from my previous school, and forgive me if I don't get the figure right, I can't absolutely recollect it, but it was in the region of £700,000 that the young people were spending when they went up the street at lunchtime. Now, obviously, that's a really valuable part of the local economy that will be replicated throughout all of our estate, I would imagine. The issue of litter always comes up. There are always staff, or normally staff, patrolling the precincts or the streets, and our school-based officers at lunchtime, just making sure that everything is okay, and that if they see anything that's out of order, that's addressed. We work with the appropriate teams in the council, but ultimately the responsibility, our schools do promote young people to be responsible citizens and make use of the bins that are around. But there's a role here for retailers as well as school staff and young people if that amount of money is being spent. And finally, in terms of stronger, healthier communities, I think Kenny alluded to this earlier, that we want to give our young people nutritious, sustainable food. Young people who are hungry and who are not eating the right stuff or eating the wrong stuff are not going to be in a position to learn. So if our catering service is providing the right fuel and the right food, then that's why it will contribute towards stronger and healthier communities from what they're consuming.
I'm quite shocked to hear that 35% of senior pupils don't use the service. I've witnessed myself some horrendous behaviour, especially in Charlotte, Das Court and Grangemouth. And I know problems can arise. I've read on social media about kids being refused. I think it was Bowness School. They didn't have the proper uniform and turned away from a meal. So we will be gauged if more people take up this service instead of eating, as you say, maybe food that's not proper for learning and development.
Yeah, what I would say about the 35%, it's 65% of eligible secondary school children for free school meals who take that up. So some choose not to take that up, and may come with a packed lunch or may source their food otherwise. What I would also say about the Bo'ness situation is that that was incorrectly circulated on social media, and that was not the position at all that happened in the school. But any instances of any, I mean, I said earlier, I've been, you know, there are staff, there are school-based officers, school staff, school-based police officers up the street in the precincts at lunchtime, just making sure things are calm, developing the relationships with businesses and shopkeepers. And if there are any issues that arise, then they address that. So anything that happens will just be dealt out of school at lunchtime, will just be dealt with in the normal procedures that schools have.
I certainly welcome that, and it's good we're all working for the same spreadsheet now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think, Roisin, you wanted to come in.
Just wanted to ask for pupils not eligible for free school meals. I know the quality of the food will be increasing. Will that also cause an increase in price for young people? I know it's already a bit expensive without this new plan, so just wondering. Thank you.
Kenny?
Thank you for that question. First of all, we are looking going forward to be engaging with children at a local level and young people. I use the analogy of Moan's son. He doesn't want his dad deciding what's on the menu, and my taste might differ completely from what the young people in the school would like. We know what you like from the current menus. We know the quality of food that you appreciate. We know the kind of offer you want at lunchtime. I was down at Falkirk High, and I met Jessie, the senior cook, who was showing us her pasta that goes in a cup and how that's good, and all these fast takeaway nutritional options that weren't available when I went in school. There's definitely engagement to be had with young people moving forward, and Falkirk Youth Voice is one avenue that we would look at, as well as the pupils who are using the service in school. In terms of increased price, the council every year reviews its pricing structure, and there is generally an increase of some sorts in line with inflation normally. However, we will be undertaking benchmarking as well, which is a project the council is already working on with fees and charges. And if there's any anomalies, we would look at it. But guaranteed, we're not using this to increase prices. We're using this to increase the quality of offer and increase the uptake in schools for all the reasons that the director said. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Gemma, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, it's just on the thing of consulting young people. We at Falkirk Champs now have the funding to start up care experienced groups within schools at lunchtimes. So depending on the timing of this, you might be able to catch them and get more of a care experienced voice, a wider care experienced voice than what Falkirk Champs can collect on our own. So that's just a note as well, alongside Falkirk Youth Voices and Falkirk Champs and the rest of the pupils. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Emma. John?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I'll make sure that's relayed back to all the schools so that they're aware of that point.
Okay, if we have no further questions, it falls to me to move the report. And I do thank Councillor Bundy for bringing this forward as a motion, because I think it's been really helpful in helping us reshape our school meal provision in particular. However, there are many facets to this particular programme. The Soil Association in Scotland works with local authorities as a key contributor to the greener and more sustainable environment, and it aims to be more locally sourcing Scottish food to take out into our schools, nurseries, supporting the circular economy and the community wealth building. Food for Life Scotland seeks to make good food the easy choice for everyone, using the power of the public food provision as a driver, and we will have a positive impact on health and the environment, as well as contributing to the local economy, and working in partnership with local authorities and catering teams is a good way of actually doing that. Food for Life programme is a nationally recognised quality mark, and in being part of that will give assurance that the produce and ingredients are traceable as well as from sustainable and ethical sources. And that's something as a local authority we want to be associated with. Being part of the programme will give reassurance to pupils, parents and carers that meals are responsibly sourced and freshly prepared by trained staff, and support the learning potential of our young people. Support the general health and promotion of our citizens by putting more fresh fruit and vegetables and whole grains on the menu, and help protect the environment, reducing the food miles and preferring sustainable food producers who are Scottish and local, thus supporting our local economy. Every pound invested can give a social return of £4.41 within 3 years, and that's something that should not be overlooked. Food for Life programme is funded by the Scottish Government and therefore no cost to local authority, and there are already 15 councils accredited, moving through the bronze, silver and gold awards. Benchmarking is the first point that we have to go through, and that exercise is being carried out against the standards as set out in the papers at 5.5. The report asks us to note that officers are being actively engaged with the benchmarking exercise and to assess the implications of achieving the bronze awards for our school meal service, and agree to the application of the process being made on any change being achieved within the existing budgets. Our catering staff already provide an excellent service, but are very much on board with this, recognising that it's a good thing for our young people, and contributes significantly to health and well-being in the most widest context, as well as an exemplar for others. So I'm happy to move the report. Councillor Sinclair?
Yeah, happy to second.
Thank you. Any other groups wish to comment?
No further comment.
Okay, thank you. No further comment? No. Councillor Bundy?
Thank you, convener. Healthier food, tastier food, supporting the local economy. These are all great things for the Falkirk area, and it's pleased to hear that we're going forward with the application for the Bronze Award, and after we achieve that, it'd be great if we went for the silver and then the gold. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No other contributions? We're happy to agree. Okay, thank you. I'm now going to take a short comfort break, 10 minutes, and recognise that there's also been some changes to the various amendments that have been circulated in relation to the motion. So it'll be an opportunity for the groups to have any discussions they're required to have at that time. So we'll have a 10-minute break.
Convener, I don't have adjusted motions from what was circulated to us the other day from Mr. Miller.
That's actually why we're having the break, so that those can be circulated to everybody.
Right, okay, thank you.
message that
Okay, folks, if we can come back to the meeting, please. Thank you. We are now going to move on to the motion in relation to school uniform. I will take questions first before we formally move the motion. So if there's any questions to begin with. Councillor Murtagh.
I have a question about the procedure that's just uncovered, because obviously we've just had two adjusted motions circulated just before the item. And I wanted to ask Mr. Moody a point of clarification on the motions themselves, because the motion which has just been circulated from yourselves as administration, it doesn't appear in its effect to have any difference to the motion which I have put forward in terms of what actual outcomes are. And I wonder if Mr. Moody could speak to that.
Okay, Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Convener. Well, I think it's fair to say that there are some points of commonality between the motion and the amendment as it currently stands. I think both recognise the fundamental point that there is guidance being issued by the Scottish Government and recognise that fact, and also recognise that decisions will fundamentally be made at the school community level. I think there is, from my reading, the difference between the motion and the adjusted amendment is really one of emphasis, and the motion, as again adjusted in the form we have it just now, I think emphasises some points from the guidance and picks those out in particular. And I think the effect of that is to set the background and context against which schools would go ahead to consider the guidance, and they'll be doing that in the knowledge that the executive has chosen to note in particular some aspects of the guidance and to emphasise those particular points. But there are, again, I think, fundamental points of commonality which I set out in the start of my answer.
So just to follow up on that question, because I'm just reading the adjusted motion that was the adjusted amendment sent round again, and point 2 is clarifying that that yes, it's non-statutory and that decisions will be made at the individual school level in partnership with the whole community, which is also the effect of the substantive motion. Nothing different. The third point considers the values and aims of the guidance already align with work being undertaken. There's no contradiction there, and I'm very happy to say that and have that. Reaffirms its commitment to continue this work. I don't think there is. I think what I'm slightly concerned is that point 1 in the motion and the adjusted amendment says it welcomes this guidance. So it welcomes this guidance. Now I'm being transparent in highlighting some of the things that are in that guidance. But if the guidance, if point 1 is that the amendment is that it welcomes the guidance, then it's welcoming those things too. It's just that I have noted them, not welcomed them, not said, oh, well, we should do this or anything like that. I've just been transparent about what that guidance contains and highlighted that. So I'm not sure how the two, I know you said there's a difference in emphasis, but in actual practicality, there doesn't actually seem to be any contradiction between the two. They're not different.
I think I've given my answer on that point. There's a judgment that members can make on that when they come to the debate.
Convener, I would say that obviously I've put forward this motion and I gave advance notice even that I was drafting this motion to groups, and I have given opportunities to discuss and come to agreements and amend, and I have also adjusted my motion even prior to the deadline and sent that round. To be getting a second adjusted motion just before, I mean, I'm happy to talk to everyone. As you know, I will talk with everybody. None of, in terms of if you've got effectively exactly the same motion, just with slightly different emphasis, I'm sort of puzzled why we can't just come to some sort of agreement, but I will press my motion, because fundamentally, what's contained is the same thing.
Okay, we're currently in the process of questions. And Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Convener. Could I ask officers, please, to just give us a bit of background to this in terms of the current policies in relation to school uniform and in terms of the actions being recommended, being taken in relation to the implementation of the guidance?
Okay, Mr. Wood.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Thanks, Councillor Hannah. I mean, I think it would be, it's fair to say there's a plethora of advice and a plethora of guidance that comes to head teachers on a very regular basis. And you're aware, because that's what we're discussing just now, that the recent guidance on school uniform and clothing, which was published in September 2024, 45 pages of it, and a shorter executive summary, where the emphasis, and I draw your attention to page 9 of the document, that it highlights in the second paragraph that it's schools that are best placed to decide on the approach that will work best for their pupils. And ultimately, that's why there's not there is authority guidance already on dress code. It fits in very well with the guidance which we welcome. This was published alongside other guidance at the same time around mobile phones, and there's work progressing in schools around that. The guidance basically centres around 3 principles, which is about affordability. All of our schools for years have been making sure that young people and children have what they need, uniform, non-uniform items, whatever it is. So there would never be a case where young people are in a place where they're feeling that they don't have what they need to come to school. And just for members' information, in primary, 28% of our young people receive the clothing grant, and the clothing grant in primary is £125. And in secondary, 22% of our young people receive the clothing grant, which is £155. Now, those levels are slightly above the national level of £120 and £150 respectively. So there's that side of it. But in terms of affordability, all schools you will find in terms of uniform, all primary schools will have a uniform bank, a school clothing bank. Falkirk High School, I'm just going to give you a couple of examples because this is prevalent across our estate. Falkirk High School have an online catalogue that parents access through a QR code. It's not just uniform, it's free food, household supplies, and sanitary products, whatever. Braes High School, and perhaps we can ask Roisin and Rory to talk about this. They met with the Cabinet Secretary for Education and have been in the Parliament because of their work on Child Poverty Action Group for Scotland. And part of that is focusing on uniform. So there's not a school in our estate that doesn't address that principle that's in the policy around affordability. In terms of sustainability, I think our school clothing banks and our almost like shops that secondary schools have absolutely recycle. To the extent where some schools are saying, please don't give us any more because we've got more than we can handle at the moment. Many of our actual school uniform items, if a school decides it is appropriate to have a blazer, for instance, there's an example on page 22, a school in Aberdeen in Murray in the guidance, and Buckie High School, that says we've got blazers as part of our uniform, but here's how we address that. But in terms of sustainability, many of the items are made out of sustainable materials, recycled bottles, they're washable. It's not like uniform items from the Victorian ages where the blazers would be woolen and you would have to dry clean them. It's not like that anymore. So there's a very, our young people are very aware sustainability, and that is built into our policy. But principally, it's about equality, diversity, and inclusion. That's really important. The number one thing about school uniform, and the reason we have guidance, and the reason that all of our schools are already fitting within this guidance in terms of what they're doing, is that it's a leveller. It's having a school uniform as a leveller in terms of equality, inclusion, stigma, peer pressure, bullying. I've mentioned the uniform banks. I've mentioned the fact that many items are recycled. And gone are the days where the impression was, well, I'm not wearing something that's recycled. There's actually an app called Vinted, which is principally to recycle clothing items, and the biggest user of that app in age group is 16 to 24-year-olds. So it's commonplace for young people to recycle items. The cost of the school day I have touched on in terms of the clothing grant and the school-led initiatives. But a big thing for schools, and I'm talking here and representing the views of 60 head teachers. This isn't a personal opinion. Yes, I'm using experience of being 18 years as a head teacher in this field, but I'm representing the views of 60 head teachers here. And what they would all tell you is it sets the tone in a school, but importantly, it's about the safety and the security of young people. And in schools, when there are many people coming in and out, the number one thing has to be, you need to make sure if there's somebody there that shouldn't be there, then they're dealt with promptly. And when you have 400, 500, 600 young people in an area, you can easily identify someone who shouldn't be there if they're not in school uniform. So all of that is already happening in our schools. I think the guidance is very balanced. But the key thing about it is that the decision making and the consultation, if appropriate, is at school level and directed by head teachers. And so it's not appropriate to pick out specific sentences from the guidance because and mandate that, because schools are fitting in with that and as appropriate to their own settings. And then the final point I would make is, I think gone are the days where if you didn't have your jota or if you weren't wearing the right colour of trainers or whatever it is, that you would be punished for that. That's just not the case at all. There are expectations and there are standards in every school, and staff will speak with young people who they are noticing whatever it is that they're having difficulty with. But the underlying purpose of that is to provide supportive action, because if you notice somebody doesn't have something and you might not have picked it up previously, then schools will intervene and they will provide that young person with whatever it needs, school uniform, not school uniform, something else. They'll be provided with it so they can access their education.
Thank you, convener.
Thank you. Councillor Spears, you had your light on. Could you put your microphone back on?
Pick up what Councillor Murtagh says. If there's very little difference between the amendment and the motion, surely you will be magnanimous and go with the motion.
I think those differences will come out during the debate. Councillor Spears. Councillor Nimmo.
Yeah, thanks, convener. John, obviously, as you just stated, this is merely guidance. And I think it's possibly coming down to how it's enforced at individual schools. If a pupil or group of pupils attend school and refuse to wear a uniform, what action's taken?
Thanks, Councillor Nimmo. Do you know when we talk about enforcement, and that's a strong word to use, that practically all policies in schools, and schools need a range of policies in order to function with a number of people there, so that people know what the expectations and what the standards are. And just like if we have a behaviour policy where there was somebody not complying with the expectations of how they should be conducting themselves in the classroom, then action needs to be taken about with that to make sure that you can have a conversation with a young person to find out what the problem is. Is there an issue? How do we support? What do you need in order to do that? And that's the way we would approach any policy in school, including dress code. It is non-statutory, you can't enforce it, but actually the vast majority of young people want to be part of the team, and if your guidance and your policy at a local level is sufficiently flexible enough, then that's absolutely fine. But it's a leveler, because if you didn't set an expectation and schools didn't come up with what their dress code is, you would have young people buying really expensive items of clothing, and somebody else that couldn't afford it would want it, and it starts to create that peer pressure and that stigma, and that bullying that I referenced earlier. But importantly, if there was a group of young people turning up like that, then you would have a conversation with them. You would provide whatever support they require, and the vast majority of young people are just complying. There's not a problem. There will be no young person, and in order to make this statement, I did a quick survey, particularly of our secondary head teachers last night, who are punished, who are prevented from accessing their learning if they are not in school uniform. That wouldn't be acceptable, and that is not what is currently operating in our schools at the present time.
Okay, thanks for that, John. And that was going to be my second question, as to whether pupils were likely to be sent home. So, no, thanks for that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, John, and I'm sure you recognise that this motion is a pro-uniform motion for all the reasons you've already stated, and you said you welcomed the guidance there, and I don't know if you've noted within the guidance the recommendations about, as you say, non-punishment and deprivation of learning. So a question would be, you said there that no child is punished, but I know you've only been in post a short time, so in the time that we have been councillors, all of us here, you're telling me that a detention isn't a punishment, or being prevented from going to class repeatedly and isn't an interruption to learning. So no children get detention or get held back or have to go and report to their pupil support teacher for not wearing, for example, a blazer and wearing a jacket instead on a cold winter's day.
Thanks, Councillor Merton. I'm not going to address this as the head teacher of Arbor High School. I'm going to address this as Director of Education. It is very clear that if schools have dress codes, just like they have any other codes for any other policy, that if young people are not complying with that, then they will be asked, is there an issue? What's the story? What's the problem? And then provided with whatever it is they need and the support they need in order to try and meet whatever the expectation is. But I can absolutely confirm with you from the survey that I conducted last night with the secondary head teachers that there is no punishment attributed to not wearing school uniform. Now, if there are a group of young people who are not wearing uniform and they are spotted at an assembly or something, and this would be the case across all of our schools, then they may be asked to just stay behind for a couple of minutes to find out, what's the story, guys? Is there something we can do to support you here? Come and see us if you need to see us. That's the approach that's taken.
Okay, so a detention is not a punishment then? Because you said there was no punishments given.
I'm not aware of, I don't think it's appropriate for punishments to be given, and I've been assured by the secondary head teachers that that's not how they operate.
Okay, well, I'd like to ask you a question whether you recognise this as from a former representative to this committee who gave me a statement about their time, and what they've said is that There were many times during my 6 years at Larbert High when anyone not wearing a blazer during an assembly was made to stay behind and spoken to, sometimes resulting in negative referrals or detention. As part of the S6 leadership team, we were routinely asked to carry out blazer and uniform checks on fellow students. We were asked to report infractions to the year team, who then gave punishments to those without full correct uniform, even if it was just a blazer. I queried the value and emphasis that this is, and she goes on to make comment, but you don't recognise that there are punishments given out both by way of detention, by way of negative referral home, and sometimes by other means as well. And that if you are repeatedly held back from your class and not allowed to go to your class, for example, for not wearing only a blazer on a cold winter's day and wearing a jacket instead, that isn't an interruption to your learning.
Well, I would have thought a blazer would be an additional layer of protection, but I do understand that it may not fit underneath the jacket. I've already said that at assemblies, and I have to say, the assemblies take place once a month or once every 6 weeks in most schools. It's certainly not a daily occurrence that young people would be kept behind. But part of that is about trying to find out what the underlying factors are for why that young person's not wearing uniform, and providing supportive action. I'm not aware of young people getting negative referrals or detentions for not wearing their uniform. Now, what may happen, and the result of a conversation, is that the behaviour that then emerges as a result of that conversation might be inappropriate, and there might be a reason to intervene at that point. But generally, it's just like, could you just make sure if you need a bit of help, you go and see somebody to get it, or that you're appropriately dressed tomorrow. But the underlying principles of uniform is that young people come to their place of work, that they are dressed appropriately. It does affect the tone of what happens in a school. It absolutely is in terms of a leveller in terms of equality and inclusion. But importantly, it is about the safety and security of all the young people in that building, when there can be hundreds and lots of young people milling around at one time. So I would hate to think what kind of different conversation we would be having if something happened in a school as a result of not having a dress code and not being able to identify someone who shouldn't have been there in the first place. But perhaps it would be appropriate at this point to bring Roisin, Rory, Gemma into the conversation.
Sorry, convener. I'm not sure that it is from the point of view that this is questions to the officers. I have questions for officers, and I'm not making statements about things. I'm asking questions, and
Councillor Murtagh, I think you've had the director's answer. I think he's repeated that on a number of occasions now.
Well, that's fine, but I think that there is a disconnect here in that I don't understand how I'm saying that. Does he recognise the statement of children who are saying, and I have other statements from staff who are saying that children get detention and that nothing has changed from a period where perhaps children were sent home for not having the right shoes, not having a blazer. I'm confused as to, I don't disagree with all the statements that the director is making about all the things that are positive. I have those too. But from a fundamental question, I'm asking, does he recognise that there are punishments, and there have been punishments? I've picked this council term because that's the period that we're all here, given to children repeatedly, including detentions, including negative referrals home, including constantly having to report or reporting repeatedly to pupil support teachers, and that those are punishments. They are punishments, and they are affecting education. And I'm not sure, maybe I recalled an email that I found when I was portfolio holder between myself and the director on wishing to discuss that subject. So those are there in the record, and I don't know why. My question is, are they not punishments?
Councillor Martin, I'll give Mr Reid a final opportunity. I'm not entirely sure you're going to get a different answer. You may not like the answer, but that's his answer. But I'll give him a final opportunity to respond to that before I move on.
Thank you. I mean, I think I have answered that question. What I would say is if there are specific examples that, as is detailed in the policy on, so let me find it, on page 37, where it talks about complaints regarding uniform, then those would be dealt with at a local level by the school. And I'm sure if there are any concerns or complaints that you're referencing there, that I would hope that the school has had an opportunity to address that. But I think I've set out my expectation in terms of a director for what the service should be doing.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? No, we move now to the motion. We have a motion and we have 2 amendments before us. So I'll go to Councillor Murtagh to address. Oh, sorry, Bailey Kerr, you had a question.
Thanks, Convener. And after seeing the amendment, which is by Councillor Sinclair, it's quite similar to ours, which we're asking just let the schools deal with this. And I'm quite happy to withdraw our amendment.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Councillor Bailey Kerr. That's helpful to know at this stage. But I'll go to Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, Convener. So I'd like to start with the reason for bringing forward this motion and what this motion actually means in practice. Firstly, the motion has always been pro-uniform, and as the new national guidance, but in reflection that there have been some misconceptions on this, I've now moved this to the very first clause in order to emphasise the point. Secondly, that the intention of the motion is to inspire action and awareness for schools to review their uniform policies and practices around them in light of the new national guidance, which was published in September. This would, of course, be in conjunction with pupils, parents and wider school community, but on that too, there are helpful recommendations in the guidance. So what does the guidance actually say? Well, as detailed in point 3 of the motion, it emphasises the key areas of affordability, sustainability, equality, diversity and inclusion, and crucially, that pupils' comfort, happiness and freedom to learn should be at the heart of school uniform policy. Who can argue with that? I don't think any of us are. It focuses very much not only on reducing the cost of the school day and making uniforms more sustainable, but on the practical aspects of going to school in Scotland, especially with the changeable climate we all know and love. The recommendations were themselves born out of an extensive consultation process which involved parents, schools, staff, local authorities and many children themselves, including input from the Children's Parliament. As we discussed the importance of being an unfairty previously, I think it was really interesting to look at the evidence from them, and I'd encourage members to look at that documentation. And it's clear from the evidence gathered that, and I will quote from the report here, that children want to be free to move and play as well as be comfortable to help them enjoy their learning. They told us that it is important that the clothes they wear to school suit the weather and are comfortable and practical to allow them to participate in all types of activities at school. When it came to the COSLA board meeting evidence session, I was still the education portfolio holder at that time, and I recall that one aspect among many that we commented on was how standards and expectations of dress in modern workplaces have changed over the years, even at the very highest level. We could see from sitting around the table that there were very few suit jackets and ties present, and this tends to be the case in most workplaces where previously standards were much more formal. Even in Parliament, you daily witness MSPs buzzing about in their trainers to get from one place to the next and having no qualms about sticking on a fleece or a garment if they are called in a meeting, whether it's with a constituent or a minister. While uniform can be important in many jobs, they generally match the tasks at hand in practicality, comfort and safety requirements, perhaps now much more than they did in decades past. The guidance very much reflects this too, and while being prepared for future work and arriving at school to learn is important, the idea that the best way to learn is restricted to, for example, a blazer, collar, tie, smart trousers and black leather shoes to me seems no more logical than if teachers returned to wearing schoolmasters' robes in order to preserve rank and respect. Whether we have nostalgia for it or not, that time is gone. We know that it isn't just ways of working that see people working from home in their slippers, which have changed in recent years. Educationally, we embrace and encourage outdoor learning, messy play, active travel. We also celebrate and support the diversity of children who may have a variety of different learning and sensory needs, which makes the rigidity of some uniform policies and their enforcement distressing and indeed wholly at odds with what this guidance says. I am very well aware that not all schools in Falkirk have the same uniform policies and attitudes to enforcement vary. And where I embrace that we should have local solutions for local communities, children, parents and indeed staff should have a right to a basic equal framework which respects the same principles no matter where they experience that education. And that is the point of this motion, not to spend lots of time pointing out where there are practices which run contrary to the new guidance, though there are, but to instigate reflection and action, because despite all the good work going on in schools, and I heartily acknowledge the efforts of parents, staff and pupils in this, there remains inequality of experience across our schools on this issue. I have spoken to many children, staff and parents who have seen the negative effect that daily reminders on perfect uniform have had on the attitudes and level of mutual respect between staff and pupils too. This includes children with additional learning and support needs, and some very strong words from staff on the impact enforcement checks have on them. Getting detentions, referrals home, reporting again and again to your pupil support and feeling like what is most important to your teachers is not that you are at school and ready to learn, but that you attend in the least practical item of clothing possible for a wet and rainy Scottish walk to school, rather than the one jacket your parents could afford to get you to actually wear. That just doesn't help anyone, least of all struggling families. When the situation happens in some schools, but not in others, it introduces an inherent unfairness which national guidance gives a good opportunity to address. While I hear the benefits espoused of don't they look smart in terms of rigid uniform policy such as blazers and formal trousers, etc., as a mother to 2 teenage girls, one area that greatly concerns me is the message that sends to the kids that their appearance is more important than their attitude and abilities. To reinforce the message that how other people see you is more important than the substance of who you are and what you do. That is the opposite message I want my kids to absorb in helping them to take care of their mental health. And I lament the role that schools seem to be inadvertently playing in reinforcing outward image over what is most practical. If you turn up to school clean, on time, identifiable as a pupil and ready to learn, your school should be happy to have you there. Even if you just turn up, as we're hearing, they will work with you to support you to understand why that is, why you're struggling, and help you with the rest. I know that in most cases that is indeed what happens at school, but every child has a right to expect the same. The national guidance is provided to help schools and local authorities make decisions locally, but it has a very strong emphasis on removing barriers to participation and enabling equity for Scotland's pupils across the board. Fundamentally, kids go to school to learn, not to promote an image. There are ways to take pride in your school and be ready for work that don't involve enforcing impractical rules that only sow further disrespect and poor attitudes for many kids. If they're cold in the winter, let them keep their jackets on or wear an extra garment if that's what they want to do. If they are more comfortable in leggings than the school skirts on offer in the shop, what is the big deal with that? If only shoes or trainers that fit you have more black or white or whatever on them than the school prefer, so what? Who exactly is looking under the executive table here to see what shoes we are wearing to work? There are ways to tackle bullying and indeed security that don't involve the rigid levels of prescription that we see. This is about consistency, common sense, and ensuring that all children in Falkirk go to school entitled to the same standards that match the circumstances we now live in. The national guidance provides an ideal opportunity for that to happen. And I again stress there is no contradiction in what the movers of the amendment have moved and what will actually happen in effect in my motion. All that is different is that the guidance which they welcome, I have listed some of the things within it, and that's to be honest and transparent about what it actually means. So I move the motion in my name.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Councillor Patterson.
Thanks, convener. Happy to second. And I know that we've spoke extensively about this issue already, so I'll keep it very brief. It's already been said that this was a study carried out by the Scottish Government in collaboration with parents, schools, pupils. This was their recommendations after their extensive consultation. And I know that Councillor Murtagh has already said we need to reflect the change in culture. If the point in school is readying our young people for the workplace, I think it's quite unrealistic, especially in a post-COVID world, that many future workplaces would have such a strict uniform policy. And I think just looking around the room here today, it seems a little hypocritical that we're in a very formal setting and there's many of us here that don't have blazers, ties and shirts on. And I feel like it's quite pertinent, given in this same room only a few months ago, we were debating whether or not young people should be walking 3 miles to school. You know, if we're genuinely wanting to promote active travel to school, then I think that the young people that we look after should have the independence and the flexibility to wear something that is weather appropriate. Again, I know there's a lot of misconception about this and it's been panned as anti-uniform. It's certainly not that. We all appreciate the importance of school uniform as a leveller, but this motion is about having a more consistent and inclusive policy which will remove any barriers to learning for our young people. So happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Okay, I'll go to Councillor Sinclair.
Thank you, convener. And at the beginning, I moved the amendment in my name. And I'd like to thank Mr. Reid for his comprehensive answer earlier, which touches on some of what I'll say in this contribution. I hope I wasn't reading over my shoulder, copying my homework. As stated within my amendment, our administration welcomes the Scottish Government's publication of this new non-statutory 45-page guidance document on school uniform, recognising that it has cross-party support through COSLA Children and Young People's Board. We note that the purpose of the guidance, as stated on page 4 of the document, is to help local schools and head teachers make decisions over school uniform as and when the question arises. Our administration firmly believes that the appropriate places for these decisions to be made is in schools, and it is of vital importance that head teachers involve the whole school community in these decisions, but also to identify and understand what is important to them. Of course, the question over school uniform has been constant for as far back as I can remember. As controversial as it may be for Falkirk Council's education portfolio holder, I was educated in Fife at Dunfermline High School. Unfortunately, I couldn't find my old school tie this morning, or any tie for that matter, as it would appear. But I have more fond memories of my school days than not. Now, I know that is not the same for everyone, as individual experiences at school differ, and the same can be said for school uniform. If you were to ask 100 people in the street about it, the chances are you would hear 100 different opinions. Now, I don't intend to spend too much longer discussing the merits or otherwise of uniform. I think we've heard enough about that, and it might not be particularly high in folks' priorities. What I will do, however, is touch on the situation in our communities that does hold a great deal of concern that's mentioned within the amendment, is that of the cost of living, and specifically the cost of the school day for parents, carers and families. And I think it was Roisin that mentioned earlier in relation to the cost of school meals that these can sometimes be expensive. We know that costs are rising, and we know that now more than ever families have less disposable income. That's why it's crucially important to ensure that support is available for our whole school communities, from access to good nutritious food to affordable and sustainable uniform and clothing. And we've got some great examples of the supportive environment in our schools today. Braes High, for example, have been featured by the Child Poverty Action Group for their work at their Reducing the Cost of the School Day Working Group. Their culture of take what you need with take what you need trolleys creates an environment where young people are supported no matter their circumstances, and without ever highlighting them, breaking down that stigma. This includes a food pantry, clothing bank and pupils receiving school packs with learning resources. There are other examples too. Falkirk High School, for example, have an online catalogue that parents can access through a QR code, offering free food, household supplies, school uniform, non-school clothes, sanitary products and more. We also have magic breakfasts at Easter Carmuirs and Falkirk High, where bairns receive their free breakfast and it's open to all pupils. Our schools have clothing banks, and most, if not all, have access to food supplies for parents and carers who require that support. Alongside this work, our early learning and childcare centres run a large number of initiatives to support families with financial assistance, access to funding and signposting, as well as clothing and food banks and cook-along events. My amendment asks for a briefing to be provided to elected members because I think it's really important for all of us to know and understand what support is available, including for school uniform. But also, it's really important to understand the deep-rooted issues that lead to this support being necessary in modern Scotland and what we can do to properly address those issues and improve the lives of families across the council area. With that, convener, I will close and ask members to back my amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sinclair and Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, convener. I'm happy to second Councillor Sinclair's amendment. I come to this with the attitude of that we should be trusting the head teachers and the school community to make the school uniform policy to reflect the culture that they want to create in their own school. This guidance by the Scottish Government is non-statutory, and I think it would be the step in the wrong direction to try and dictate centrally what's best for each individual school. I reject that notion that the centre knows best. I think the schools know best, and that's why I'm supporting Councillor Sinclair's amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Bundy, and I open it up for debate. Councillor Spears.
Yeah, in support of the motion, I can speak as somebody who's probably worn more uniforms than most, but these uniforms move on. You look at the police uniform, the army uniform, everywhere else. And we're stuck in this sort of Edwardian garb, which is not completely functional for how things have moved on. Maybe we should have, instead of each school deciding, maybe let pupils decide on having a new type of uniform. It'd be interesting to hear our school reps' opinion on that. But there's different materials now. There's different stuff. And I can say thanks to the army for changing their uniform, because guys aren't sitting for 2 hours bulling boots, iron shirts, because these things are outdated now. Things have moved on, and we should move on with them.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Spears. And Councillor Martin, I notice you've got your hand up, but can I ask you to keep your remarks to the summing up?
As a point of clarification from what was said by the mover and seconder, because I don't understand that Councillor Bundy has seconded the motion. Your amendment welcomes the publication of the Scottish Government guidance, which talks about these standards, but he then said that he didn't agree with them. He didn't agree with their approach from being from the centre. So I don't understand how those two things are compatible. Perhaps you could clarify.
That wasn't what I took out of it, but I'll ask Councillor Bundy to just briefly just clarify that.
Non-statutory.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Gemma, and then I think is it Roisin? Yeah, Gemma.
Thank you. First, this is just Falkirk Champs have worked too hard on this to leave it out. This is just something for head teachers to consider when they're making their decisions in their school about uniform. This is just something we've wanted to say for a long time, and it needs to come out. We can't keep this to ourselves anymore. And thank you, Falkirk Schools, and thank you, Education, for making uniform a lot more accessible. Keep doing what you're doing. We're very, very happy that you've got accessible uniform in your schools and you're supporting people to get it where they want it. Thank you. Keep doing that. You don't need to change that. But school uniform and what is contained in the Scottish Government's guidance and what is contained in the motion is something Falkirk Champs have discussed for a long time. And we talked about it again when planning our film, Dear Education. This Scottish Government guidance and this motion is absolute gold to us. It supports many, including the care experience community. And as you may know, sometimes we're taken out of school in the middle of the day or from a Nando's to be moved to a new family, a new children's residential home, or even to a different local authority. We have no knowledge of this move prior to that. We go with nothing but what we're wearing. nothing at all. And that is no fault of our own. We have no prior knowledge of that move. And this motion and guidance means that if after that we have the strength to go into school, and regardless of that, if we, with everything going on in our lives in the care system, have the strength to walk into an education establishment, that we won't be turned away from class. We won't be punished for not having those pieces of uniform. We might not have our blazers, we might not have our tie, because we had no time to get those, and those are not a priority for us with everything else going on. And we get to walk into class, we get to walk into school and not be punished for not having that. As this is an experience of many in the Champions Board, it's an experience I've had as well. That one teacher in the hallway who stops and monitors everyone to see what you're wearing, and will call you out if you forget one thing. We have a right to education, and this motion and guidance supports and backs that up. And other points the Champs wanted to raise include the schools are so hot in the warmer months that it's hard to wear blazers and jumpers, and there's little point in even bringing them, other than fear of being punished for not having them and being denied into class and being made late to class for not having them. Uniform guidance and the texture of the uniforms is not taking into account neurodiversity. The texture feels miserable to some of us, and we physically cannot put it on without feeling sick. Blazers and other branded items are expensive, which we appreciate that there's support to access that, keep going. But it would be very simple if it just wasn't mandatory. It's particularly unfair where the school catchment covers a lot of deprived areas. It's also unfair on the parents, carers and families with low income regardless of the local deprivation. And sometimes it felt like the schools cared more about what we wore than about teaching us. But please don't take that the wrong way. It's harsh, but that's our experience. And we won't sugarcoat it. We can't. So we just ask that this is considered as an opportunity to take a positive turn along with what you're doing already. This isn't at all an attack on teachers. This isn't at all an attack on establishments or education, and we do not want it to come across that way. And I can say a lot of us in Champs, including myself, are actually a bit more likely to wear it if we're not forced or punished for not wearing it. I wore a blazer of my own volition back in June because I wanted to, because it felt good, because made the chain of office I have got the privilege of wearing from time to time look fantastic. The texture felt amazing. The shape was fantastic. The material, lovely. The school ones, not so much. So please just, when it comes to head teachers, when it comes to schools to consider, please just stop and think about that. Please just stop and think about the care experience community and how much your consideration of that will benefit us. And please just consider the children, consider young people, consider parents, carers, and honestly, just don't make it mandatory, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Roisin?
Yeah, I was really privileged last year. I got to go to speak at Parliament at a uniform roundtable, and I got to hear about all of the issues that come with uniform, but also how a lot of people are trying to solve these issues. Uniform banks in Glasgow and Edinburgh, and our school also has a uniform bank. Even just thinking about, I know that Laura Murtagh has talked about messy play and it being uncomfortable, but I would say at Braes it's a really welcoming place where if you want to wear leggings to school, as long as they're not branded, that's fine. I know that I've personally chosen my trousers and jumper that I wear to school to be what I would like, and they allow that at Braes as well. And even the blazers, it's something, so we have a piped blazer because we're captains, and that's something, that's a privilege that we have, and it's something that children, look forward to getting to wear if they are able to become a house or a school captain. So I think it's a really good, it's a very honourable thing to have, and a lot of pupils at school I think like it. Even just with, if you don't have it, you're never ever punished at Braes. It's always just a quick conversation as to why you don't have it. But also I think that having the blazer and the tie, I don't think it's old-fashioned in any way. I think it's honestly preparing us for the world of work. You know, they're not enforcing, they're encouraging us to wear the blazer and the tie. And most of us would do that just in the same way. When I go to my job at the weekend, I am required to wear the uniform. So it's teaching you a life skill rather than trying to restrict you from your learning. I think also with messy play and outdoor learning, as a 6-year pupil who's been through senior years now, there's not a lot of that. I wouldn't say it's a lot of sitting at your desk and studying for your exams and learning the content. So I've never ever found that my uniform is a restriction to that. Also, you can wear your blazer, but if you feel like you're too hot, you can take it off. If you're too cold, you can put it back on. If it's really cold in the school, teachers are happy for you to put on your coat just for the 50-minute lesson. Some classrooms are colder than others. But in no way, I've never found my uniform to be a restriction. And honestly, I feel ready to go into the world of work. I see my dad go to work in the morning, and yeah, he's not in a blazer and a tie, but he's wearing smart clothes and he's ready to go into his workplace, just like I'm ready to walk into school in the morning and start my first lesson and be ready to go. So that would be my take on it.
Thank you, Roisin. Rory?
Yeah, I would just like to follow that up and agree and touch on a point that Laura Murtagh made earlier, in the sense that wearing a blazer and tie is detrimental to your learning, which I am in no belief that that is the case. I strongly believe that wearing the blazer and tie fosters a really good mentality. You're keeping yourself smart. You feel like you're ready for the school day. I know I definitely do. Put on the blazer and tie, it just makes me feel so much more school or work ready. I just get into that kind of mindset. I know it's been proven when there's non-uniform days in schools, the productivity is much lower, the disruption in classes is much higher, a lot less work gets done. So there's that. I would also like to touch on the ties, following up what Roisin said about blazers. Again, at Braes, we have 3 different ties. We have a red tie for juniors S1 to 3. We have a grey tie for seniors S4 to 6. And then we have tartan ties that me and Roisin have on. These are gained for leadership activities. So if you're a captain, if you're a house captain, if you do coaching within or out with the school. And again, these are very honourable. Everyone's kind of working towards getting a tartan tie. And juniors tend to look up to, they're like, I want to get one of them one day. So I do not believe there is any negativity in it. And especially at Braes, it is not enforced, it is not punished, it is encouraged, because they want to foster that school image and it really identifies you as a pupil. Like, if you eliminate the blazer and the tie, you also said that you want your kids to be coming up to school clean and identifiable as a pupil. How are they going to be identifiable as a pupil of that school if all they have on is black trousers and a white shirt? They could be any school. There's nothing linking them to that school. So then that links again to your issue with security. You could just have random kids coming in from other schools just in that same white shirt, black trousers. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Rory. I've got Bailey Kerr and I've got Councillor Hannah, and then I think we'll bring it to a close.
Thanks, convener. I really appreciate the last 3 comments, and it's getting you a wide view of the younger people's opinions. And like Councillor Bundy, my amendment was simply just to say, and I don't think it's any different for Councillor Murtagh's amendment, a motion, just let the schools decide, individual schools decide what the policy is. After speaking to many teachers, head teachers, parents and pupils, the one that and it was just mentioned in there, point 5 of the motion, where it isn't compulsory, it's encouraged, and when it says it should not be promoted or encouraged, I don't agree with that part of the motion. And what I didn't want to happen is we're allowing people to come in to school wearing what they feel comfortable and what they like, and that then goes to designer clothes, and it allows people to wear the designer trainers, jackets, shirts, t-shirts, where them who can't afford it is then stigmatised, and that's I don't think that's what anybody wants to happen. It's already touched on the security. I spoke to one of the head teachers last week, and they were, a couple of months ago, there was an intruder came in to the school, and they were identified straight away because they weren't wearing a uniform and were restricted for coming into the school. So I really think it should be the school that should be allowed to decide. And I think the last 3 comments are absolutely key to how people vote the day. Thanks, Convener.
Can I ask a point of information on that? Do you wish to bring back plimsolls?
I don't think that's relevant, Councillor Spears, and I don't think it's appropriate. Councillor Hannah.
Sorry, I had a 19-1. I put it in
you.
the chat.
Unfortunately, I don't see the chat, Councillor Murtagh.
I was relying on the clerk, so I didn't want to interrupt during the speeches. Can I have a 19-1?
We'll hear your 19-1.
Okay. It was just an answer because there was during speeches before I was asked some questions about what I thought about, and to clarify what I'd said, and about in terms of uniform, how you be identified as a pupil. I have not said that they should get rid of ties or specific items altogether. In fact, I have not even said in the motion that they should get rid of blazers. What I have said is that and it notes within the guidance, and this is very important, that's a direct quote in point 5 from the guidance, which is the quote is there should not be compulsory within school uniform policies, including blazers, and that these should not be promoted or encouraged by schools. That's a direct quote from the guidance, which is being welcomed in the motion by the administration and seconded by the Conservatives. That's not my words, and I've not emphasised that. That is what is being welcomed.
Who's the 91 for? Because
I was asked about how children could be identified from a security perspective, and I think it's really important that we don't use this in an emotive way, that somehow this is not an anti-uniform policy. So there's nothing in the difference. There's no difference between the 2 motions and their actual effect. It's not an anti-uniform policy.
Okay, I think you've made your point,
okay.
Councillor Murtagh.
It's important.
Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Convener. I want to say thank you to the Braes High School pupils for their useful contributions, and to Gemma for a broader contribution. When I first looked at this motion, I was not aware of what the issue was, because my daughter went to the Braes High School. I'm very familiar with the Braes High School, and I know what the many things that they do there to ensure that there is no stigmatisation and so on. So, and I welcome that. Having heard a great deal more from others, Gemma in particular, but also from others, it does appear that there is a different approach in different schools, and there is at least the perception that in some schools young people are being made to feel uncomfortable. If that perception exists, then it is absolutely our responsibility to ensure that we put into place arrangements to stop it from happening. All the issues about sustainability, the issues about the problems of poverty, I would absolutely agree. I think there's not a great deal to pick and choose between the motion and the amendment, but having originally taken the view that I was going to be supporting the motion, I will continue to do so. I think it would have been easier if it had simply been accepted. I think there's a perception out there that this is anti-uniform. It's not. My daughter wore her school uniform. I wore my school uniform all through school. I don't see it being a problem for the majority of people. But as Gemma has raised, there are some people for whom there are problems, and we have to recognise that and deal with it. So I will be supporting the motion, and I thank Councillor Murtaugh for bringing it forward, but I especially thank our young representatives here on the committee for their input, which is a testament to the Falkirk Council area's education system.
Okay, thank you. I have Mrs. Craig, you wanted to come in.
Hi, thanks very much. Just for those of you that don't know me, Fiona Craig, I'm secondary teacher rep. I'm actually really I know that obviously we've covered a number around the different secondaries, and I'm obviously in a different secondary, but it was really just to clarify one of the points that there's obviously been a number raised. When we have anything that we are looking to introduce or change, you'll probably be aware that it goes out to consultation with the full school community. So when we did our last uniform update, it was open to consultation with parents, pupils, obviously staff. There hasn't been a great deal really said about that, and it was really just to say, I mean, I know that I'm obviously speaking from my own situation, but my understanding is that cognizance is actually taken with all schools now. And we do consult quite readily. Just also to thank very much the young people for their contribution, because it's actually really lovely to hear the different views, and we always will get different views, and I think we'll have to remember that. But I very much am from the point of it being very positive for the school ethos. It does build, as has been said previously, that sense of community. We do, like the majority of other schools, have a facility whereby we have new and pre-loved clothing, and has already been highlighted. The pre-loved clothing is it really highlights at the moment the sense of sustainability and the positive view of recycling that is going on obviously within all of our schools now. I think also that in terms of the equality, the diversity, the inclusion, by actually having something that we are all almost like adhering to is possibly too strong a word, but the fact that we're actually sort of following something where there is that degree of similarity, that degree of identity that you can have with your own school is a real positive. And really just finally, in the sort of the safety and security aspect that has been mentioned a few times, it's amazing actually how readily you can spot somebody who is not supposed to be within your school community. And obviously at the moment, you know, staff do wear badges, so we are readily identifiable. Some of our young people do look older, and obviously it's useful then to just be able to see who is supposed to be there or who's not. Not that that happens, obviously, as you can imagine, particularly often, but again, it's reassuring to know that actually we have a safe and secure community for all of our young people. And just wanted to give you just a slightly an overview perhaps of what an awful lot of what has been said, but really just from a secondary perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Craig, for that. And in fact, you actually covered one of the points that I was going to raise myself, is that one of the fundamental aspects is this should really be devolved down to the individual schools through their processes. And if the consultation that then comes back in a particular way, that's democracy as it is in this chamber, and we have to accept that. And I think it's very difficult for us to be sitting here and constraining that, and we really should be leaving it up to the schools to make those decisions with their parent, carer and pupil bodies. On that, I will now look to bring the debate to a close and ask Councillor Mishra to sum up.
Thanks, Convener. And just to clarify that there is no motion on the table to constrain the rights of schools to set their uniform themselves, and indeed welcome the contribution that's just been made about the consultation that happens. That consultation continues to happen, is contained within the motion, is contained within the guidance. But what is important is that actually, as well as democracy, we also have rights and standards along with democracy. And that's really important, because that's how people are protected, not just by what the majority or those who speak up in the majority say forward. So obviously, in preparation for this motion, I've talked with care experience reps. It's great to hear from Gemma. It's great to hear from the kids from Braes and about their experience. And as Councillor Hannah was saying, it's not the same across all schools. So I've talked with children, parents, staff and former school reps, as I mentioned before. And I'd like to use their comments in my summing up. So I mentioned Charlotte Clem before, who was a former rep to this committee. And she said it was vital that all uniforms are accessible, comfortable, practical and aid in the learning of students. Through my time in school, there were many occasions where it felt more important to the school that I wore the uniform compared to how wearing it affected my learning. I've already said about her comments in terms of what she was asked to do as a year 6 and as a leader. And I'd emphasise that what she then went on to say was that a much more appropriate uniform would improve children's learning and increase their comfort in school, which is vitally important. The current policy on uniform provides no benefits to pupils or their parents. Therefore, I feel it must be adapted in order to suit the needs of the modern schooling system. And she did say she would find that very difficult to have said in the committee herself at the time, or as the school captain. So from a member of staff, they said, I don't want to comment publicly because I feel I would probably get in trouble for not towing the line. But people who say these things don't happen are completely wrong. Every child is supposed to wear a blazer. Every day there is disruption because of blazer and uniform checks, tannoy announcements, assemblies where kids are held back. And I have sat in a room several times where detentions are taking place for non-blazer wearing. That's from a staff member. From a parent, I am utterly fed up at the impact that constantly being reprimanded for uniform has on my kids when they attend smartly dressed in shirt, tie, trousers and school colours but are missing a blazer. It's so hard to find shoes that fit their feet too, and the choices are limited to what I can afford, yet they get told off for wearing the only trainers that I could find to work for them. It just forces me to tell the kids to ignore the school because they have no clue, and I don't see how that helps their education. I spoke also with MSYPs, Katrina Daw and Declan McGavin, and Declan also a rep to this committee previously, who were very supportive of the aims of the motion, and they had some very insightful views to share. They felt that the deterioration in respect between pupils and staff over uniform enforcement, particularly when it was clear that staff disagreed with the policies they were asked to enforce, impacted on relationships and learning outcomes of pupils in those subjects. They also mentioned their frustration at the amount of cumulative time lost in classes through pointless arguments about precise uniform. They stressed that although they obeyed the rules over blazers themselves because they felt they had to, they could see no practical reason for them, and confirmed that when the weather turned, it meant that their regular walk to school resulted in being driven in because they could not get a jacket to fit on over the blazer, and what ends up happening is you have 3 garments instead of 1 that your parents have to think. So our children, our young people, just like those who responded to the government consultation, in many cases, I agree not all, are seeing that the prioritising of image over substance is undermining the other message. So to be clear, this motion does not take any power away from head teachers or local schools whatsoever. They remain in control of setting school uniform policy. But what it does do is encourage them to undertake a review in conjunction with parents, staff and pupils that is based on standard national guidance that has been well researched and consulted on and that all can have confidence in. It's about having appropriate standards for school dress and that pupils' comfort is prioritised above what other people may think of their school. Ultimately, it's also about ensuring that children have the same rights to access education and be treated fairly, no matter where they go to school in Falkirk, and that as an education authority, we are setting this as a policy direction going forward. Being afraid to tackle this issue properly because we are worried we might upset
Can I ask
the
you to
apple
finish,
cart.
Councillor Murtagh?
Absolutely, one last sentence. It's because we might upset the apple cart. It's not what our children deserve. The nest of fearties is what they do not want. We have to be unfearties and get this right for every child in Falkirk, regardless of where they attend in Falkirk's excellent school system. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, we'll move to the vote.
Thank you, Convener. And we have the motion which has been circulated, moved by Councillor Murtagh and seconded by Councillor Patterson, against which there is an amendment moved by Councillor Sinclair and seconded by Councillor Bundy. Councillor Meikle-John.
For the amendment. Sorry.
Councillor Bowes.
Amendment.
I think Bailey Buchanan has had to leave the meeting. Councillor Bundy.
Amendment.
Councillor Deacon.
Amendment.
Councillor Devine.
Amendment.
Councillor Garner.
The amendment.
Councillor Hannah.
Motion.
Bailey Kerr.
Amendment.
Ms Mullen. Councillor Murtagh.
Motion.
Councillor Nimmo.
Motion.
Councillor Patterson.
Motion.
I think Councillor Redmond's no longer on the call. Just confirm that. No. Mr. Seal. I think you may have your mute on.
Yeah, I've just sorted that, sorry. The amendment.
Councillor Sinclair.
Amendment.
And Councillor Spears.
Motion.
Thank you. Convener, there are 5 votes for the motion. There are 10 votes for the amendment. The amendment is accordingly agreed.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for that debate, particularly our young people for being involved in that. I think it was really helpful and good to hear your voices. Our final item on this morning's agenda is a Treasury Management Interim Review. I will first open it up for any questions. I appreciate it's getting near lunchtime. Okay, I'll ask Mrs. Templeman a very brief question. She may not be in a position to give a terribly concise view. At this stage, our interim review bases it on what we know at the moment, but are there potential implications, particularly from the UK budget, in relation to the borrowing?
Thank you. It is at early stages in terms of trying to understand the implications of the UK budget. There are some concerns that the budget, because of the increase in public spending, potentially could be a little bit inflationary. That could have an impact on interest rates, albeit just sort of 45 minutes ago, the MPC did reduce the Bank of England base rate by 0.25%. We have seen, however, a reaction from the markets, which has meant that the price for the UK, the cost for the UK government to borrow, has been increasing since the budget, potentially just the market being a bit jittery there. That impacts on how much it costs the council to borrow. So I think we've also seen some fluctuations, not necessarily in the UK market, but sort of more globally as a result of the US election. So at the moment, it feels like things are quite volatile, and it's just going to take a few weeks for maybe things to settle down a little bit and for us to get a better sense of where we're going. But the bank rate has been reduced this afternoon.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions? Okay, I will just move into formally moving the report. I think we still have still in the position that the only option available to us that is cost effective is short-term borrowing, just because of the variation in the rates, and it would be inappropriate at this stage to enter into any long-term plans. That will have an impact on our borrowing around our capital programme, and we need to obviously keep an eye on that. That will be something that will be important as we go into our budget setting in February, and at that time we may have a bit of a clearer view. Then again, we may not. The things may not have changed significantly, but this is the first of our 3 interim reviews throughout the year. We've just had our annual outturn. And therefore there still has to be a cautious approach going forward, and therefore I'm happy to move the report. Councillor Bouse.
Repeating your caution, I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Anybody, any other comments?
No further comment.
No further comments.
Okay, which case it brings us to the close of the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions and your attendance today.
Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much.
Okay.